We're back here on CBS Sports HQ just a few weeks away from the start of NBA free agency. And at this point, some players have player options, meaning they can opt out of the final season of their contract and become free agents, or they can opt in and play out the final year of their deal. A few future Hall of Famers are in that position, including this guy, LeBron James. He hit free agency last summer, signed a 2-year, $101.3 million contract with an option at $52.6 million for this 2025-26 season. We know James, though, happy playing for the Lakers, living in L.A. Can't forget about his son, Bronny, under contract with the Lakers. But at 40 years old, some decisions to make. Ashley Nicole Moss believes, like many, LeBron James will return to the Lakers as you take a look at the landing spots for some future Hall of Famers. Two on this list, though, could have new homes, and that's Chris Paul. She has him heading to the Nuggets there, and Russell Westbrook to the Kings. In addition to some of those big names, though, here's a look at the top 10 free agents this offseason. James Harden there at second, followed by Kyrie Irving. Julius Randle we're going to talk about along with Myles Turner as well, as we welcome you back inside CBS Sports HQ. John Gonzalez with me here. We're going to go through some of these names of the top names who could opt out or will definitely become free agents this offseason and the best fit for them this future. Let's go ahead and begin here with Julius Randle. We saw him on that top 10 list in his option year. Timberwolves are part of that trade with the New York Knicks. In return, they got Karl Anthony Towns. I feel like it's safe to say this worked out for both teams here. But what's next for Julius Randle? Because it doesn't seem like Minnesota, is it?
Yeah, it's one of those trades that wins for both sides, right? Julius Randle has a player option for $30.9 million. I suspect that he might actually stick around. But in the event that he exercises that player option and moves on, there's one team that has a lot of money, and that's the Brooklyn Nets, and everybody's been linked to going to Brooklyn because they have so much money to spend. Now, there's another team in the Detroit Pistons that could free up some money that might be a potential landing spot for Julius Randle, but that would also mean not retaining Dennis Schroeder, not retaining Malik Beasley. I think Julius Randle, he got off to a really slow start in Minnesota. I was one of the people who was saying, Jordan, this is a bad trade for Minnesota. They should move him to the bench. He's too much of a ball hog. The ball goes in, he over dribbles. It ends up hurting the offense. And Edwards doesn't work well with Julius Randle. And then after the All-Star break, all of a sudden Julius Randle started being more of a team player. His assists went through the roof. He was a big reason why they made it to the Western Conference Finals. I think if between Julius Randle and Naz Reid, who's another guy that we're going to talk about a little bit later, Minnesota has some serious decisions to make, but I think it might be one of those situations where he decides to stick around, whether he opts in or he decides to opt out and they extend him.
Okay, we'll wait and see what happens there. Let's get to one guy whose season still lives on, and that's Myles Turner, who has been with the Indiana Pacers for 10 seasons in the final year of this 2-year extension for him. But it looks like you have LA here as the potential landing spot for him. Why does that make sense?
Yeah, here's another guy who I also think is probably staying put, right? He's in a situation where they've made it to the NBA Finals, that he's only known the Pacers. The Pacers aren't going to want to let him go. However, if there's any team that he's been linked to, Myles Turner, year after year that people kept waiting for Myles Turner to be traded out of Indiana, it's the Los Angeles Lakers. And on paper, it makes a lot of sense because the Los Angeles Lakers have been looking for a center. They started Jackson Hayes last year. Then they would immediately yank him and go to small ball 5 with LeBron James and Dorian Finney-Smith. They have an obvious need, a hole in the middle. They need a center. He would fit perfectly. He's a rim protector and he spaces the floor, two things that the Lakers need because he can shoot the 3. However, I don't know that they're going to make the finances work, but just from an academic on-paper standpoint, he'd be awesome in LA.
And that was quite the lineup there, so that gets Lakers fans excited there. Let's get to one guy in particular who you just mentioned. That's Naz Reid. Has a player option, lots of question marks on if he'll re-sign or not. What do you think is next?
Yeah, this one's really interesting because Minnesota is really up against a cap crunch. They're deep into that second apron. They're going to have to unplug some salary. Naz Reid has a player option at about $15 million. I think he's worth more than that. He was the 6th man of the year last year. Now, the question is, where can he get more of that money? Just from, again, a landing spot, a potential spot where you'd think, okay, that makes a lot of sense. The Golden State Warriors would love to get their hands on Naz Reid. At the trade deadline, they were trying to look around. They ended up with Jimmy Butler. It was a perfect fit. A marriage of convenience, but it really ended up working out for them. But they're still casting about looking for a center. They had Quentin Post minutes in the playoffs, Jordan, and everybody's like, why? Quentin Post, what are you doing? It was out of necessity, right? Well, wouldn't you love to have Naz Reid, who, much like Myles Turner, is a guy who protects the rim. He's a big who can play 4 or 5, and he can shoot the 3. He'd be a perfect fit in Golden State for a team that is looking for a center. They were asking around about Nikola Vucevic, who's still in Chicago for reasons surpassing understanding. We have to trade for a Nikola Vucevic. With a Naz Reid, you just need to give him the money.
You're selling me here. You're selling me on that one.
Sounds good to me.
Next up, Jonathan Kuminga, a restricted free agent. Warriors expected to explore some options here. We've heard teams like the Chicago Bulls and Miami Heat are teams who have shown interest. You think that the Heat make sense here? Tell me why.
Yeah, he's a restricted free agent, and quite clearly he doesn't really factor into Steve Kerr's plans in Golden State. He fell out of the rotation once they get Jimmy Butler. Steve Kerr said he didn't like the spacing with Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga, because Kuminga isn't exactly a distant shooter. But Jonathan Kuminga, there's some overlap in terms of like, hey, Jimmy Butler isn't exactly a three-point shooter either. Well, the Miami Heat moved on from Jimmy Butler. Wouldn't Jonathan Kuminga potentially look good in a Miami Heat uniform where he could be alongside Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero and really get more into the offense, get more shot opportunity, more usage rate? Now, in order for this to happen, because he's a restricted free agent, either the Golden State Warriors wouldn't match a deal that the Heat would potentially offer him, or it would be a sign and trade. But I don't think Jonathan Kuminga is long for Golden State. They've pretty much made their intentions known with him that he probably doesn't factor into their future plans.
Lastly here on our list, Malik Beasley, the unrestricted free agent, has 1 year left on his contract with the Pistons as that expires. What's next for him?
Yeah, he's instant offense. They would love to keep him around. The Pistons had a really good year, end up as the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, Cade Cunningham is the main guy there, but Malik Beasley was a pleasant surprise. I think he ultimately ends up back with the Detroit Pistons too, but they have some decisions to make. They have a lot of guys that they're trying to retain, and they're not going to be able to keep everybody. As I mentioned, Dennis Schroeder is another one there. But if he moved on, this is just me spitballing here. We saw the Memphis Grizzlies move on from Desmond Bane, trading him to the Orlando Magic. Well, the Memphis Grizzlies could use some more offense, right? Desmond Bane, a fantastic three-point shooter, plays at both ends of the floor. Malik Beasley, not nearly as good as Desmond Bane defensively, but man, can that kid shoot the ball. So if you're the Grizzlies and you're trying to reboot this thing on the fly and you're not ready to move on from John Morant and you're not ready to move on from Triple J, and it isn't a blow-it-up situation, and you want to try to compete in the Western Conference next year, Malik Beasley could be interesting, but again, this is all speculation.
Right.
We're just having fun with this.
All signs are pointing. We always are having fun here on CBS Sports HQ. John Gonzalez joining us live here for some of the landing spots.